Hello everyone, welcome to NS Arms. I'm Nathan, and this is the assembly video for the red herring. What you're going to need is your red herring hardware kit, your whole red herring printed, a Lynx plunger, a Lynx catch, some elastic. I have some pre-cut slices here. You may get a whole strip that you'll have to cut to length, or you might get already cut to length pieces. We're going to start by putting together the catch assembly. You're going to need your front anchor piece, your spring cup, your catch, two 1 3/4 length 1032 screws. I'm going to refer to these as the long screws because there are only two sizes. You'll also need your spring spacer. You'll also need your catch spring. The first thing you're going to want to do is put your spring inside your Lynx catch and put the whole assembly inside the front anchor. Might be a bit difficult to do because there isn't a lot of room for the spring. Important to note is that you're going to want your Lynx catch to be facing this direction because otherwise it won't be able to catch properly. So you want the washer facing forward. Gonna get your spring in there. Find it helps if you have a pair of tweezers or something to hold the spring steady, and just get this in here. Now you don't want to mess around with this too much because you don't want it popping out and having to do it again. Now you're going to take your spring cup, your two long screws. You're going to have the Powered by Orion blasters, the large scallop section, facing downward, match the cutouts, thread your screws in. There's going to be some breakaway support in these holes. You just punch right through that. You don't want to over tighten because then the catch won't be able to move. Test your catch to make sure it moves freely. And your main catch assembly is almost done once you put in your spring guide. Push it in, and that's your catch assembly done. Now we're going to work on the plunger. You're going to need your plunger spacer, your two lock nuts, small O-ring, threaded rod, and a large 123 O-R X-ring. If you bought the upgrade kit, it will come with 4 of these X-rings, and they provide a little bit better performance. First thing you're going to do is take your threaded rod, take your plunger, so you're sort of going to have like an umbrella shape, thread it on a bit. You want a little bit showing, put your small O-ring on. You're going to take your flange lock nut, thread it on a little bit. And you want to slightly engage that 9 lock just till the threaded rod is poking through slightly. You want to have some compression on this O-ring, and by twisting the plunger, you'll get different compression. So you're going to take your turnaround. You're just going to push the O-ring into the hole. If it doesn't feel too tight, you want to tighten it up a little. You want just a little bit of force. Feels good. And take your X-ring, put it on the top. Now you're going to take your plunger spacer, put that on the back, other flange lock nut, and just twist that on. So just make sure everything's still working. You can do this by just twisting the plunger and tightening the back flange lock nut. So if you have the Roboman catch nut, you can use that here. And that is your plunger complete. Take the 2 parts, make sure they catch, set these parts aside. Now we're going to work on the grip. You'll need your grip core, 2 back grip pieces mirrored, and 2 front grip pieces also mirrored. This is the old grip design, so things might have changed. And you also need your trigger. Hardware-wise, you're going to need 2 hex nuts, 8 440 screws, a small dowel pin, and 7 inches of elastic. The first thing you're going to want to do, take your grip back pieces, line those up, put in 2 440 screws. Don't over-tighten, and do the same for the other side. You don't want to over-tighten because you don't want to strip out the screw, so be mindful. You're going to take one of your hex nuts, put it in the grip there, and take the corresponding grip front, cover that up, make sure to hold it in place while you screw it in. So now that nut should be trapped in place. Now you're going to take your trigger elastic, tie a knot on one end. You're going to put your elastic through the trigger. You can trim it flush. You don't have to necessarily, as long as it's not getting in the way. Then you're going to push the trigger elastic through the grip core till it pokes out the bottom. Pull it tight just so you can have a handle on it. Take your dowel pin. You're going to line up the holes. It helps to also have it protrude a little bit. So get a little bit halfway on each side. You don't have to tighten this quite yet. You should have enough slack. You're going to want your other grip front on. So install it now. Hold the elastic just to check how much trigger tension you want. So if you want a really heavy trigger pull, you pull it like all the way down. Just keep in mind, if you trim the elastic down all the way, you're not going to be able to reinstall it. So just keep that in mind and probably leave the excess here if you foresee changing things out a bit. So I'm just going to pull it about here and then make a knot. You don't want slop in your trigger pull, so I'm just gonna tighten things up a bit. There we go. Grip assembly is complete. Just, check how things feel. If there's any rough spots, sand them down, set it to the side. We're gonna assemble our turnaround and magwell now. You're gonna need your turnaround and your magwell. We're gonna do our magwell first. You're gonna need 2 440 screws, your magazine release, a dowel pin, and one of your 4-inch elastics. Take your mag release, make sure the little tooth is pointing forward. Almost looks like a fish, red herring. And you're just gonna take your dowel pin, poke it through the hole over here, till things line up. Poke it the rest of the way through with the screwdriver. Take your 440 screws. Now in the new file set, the screws might be back here. The result is the same. Take your elastic, tie it on one end. Make sure your mag release is forward. It's gonna want to balance the other way. Take your elastic, push it through the hole, kind of just poke it through, or use a pair of pliers. I'm gonna use this screwdriver here. Once you're in the back, you're gonna thread it over the release through the other hole, pull it tight. You can adjust your tension by how much you tighten the knot, tie a knot, test your mag release, make sure everything's good. If you want, you can grab a Talon magazine. Just how things fit. Set the mag well to the side. Now we're gonna do our breech. To make the breech, you're gonna need your breech back, your breech pad, and your breech, also called the Beeble Bobble. You'll also need a 4-inch elastic, your large breech screw, the other small O-ring, and 2 440 screws. Tie a knot on one side of the trigger elastic. That's to do it as far to the end as possible. Just gonna thread your elastic through the front. Make sure it comes out the back. Make sure the knot is inside the breech. Then you're gonna take your breech screw, your O-ring, put them one on top of the other, thread them in. Try not to cross thread. And you're just gonna twist this to a decent amount of tightness and then go into your turnaround. Make sure it seals properly. You want it to seal behind the turnaround, so you're just gonna tighten that up until it sticks decently. So you have to make a seal between here. Now, you're gonna go through your breech back with the elastic until it pops out the other side. You're just gonna hold that tight. Again, use pliers or something. You're gonna want that tight because you want your breech to have some tension, not too much. I'm gonna give mine a lot here because I trimmed this elastic too short for myself, but I gave you guys plenty of room. Now, assuming you didn't have any hand cramps and you're able to tie your knot effectively, you should be able to trim off the excess or tuck it inside and just tuck the rest of the knot inside the hole. You're gonna cover it with your breech block. Now, you want top is the longer side, and then on the breech pad, the longer side is also on top. You're gonna take one of your 440 screws, drop it in. Again, hand tight, you don't wanna strip out the screws. Do the other one. And then after much finagling, your breech is complete. Double check your fitment, should be good. Should have some decent amount of snap back. You don't want that to be super tight so that the bungee just stretches. You want a little bit of snap. Set that to the side. Now we're gonna assemble the main body. You're gonna need most of your body pieces. 2 Talon Claw 4 bars, 4 short 1032 screws, 2 long 1032 screws, and 1 hex knot. Take one of your threaded rods, make sure the 2 wider space holes are through the front. You might need to run it back and forth a few times just to get things to sit properly. You're gonna take your grip module, you're gonna put that in. Now, you're just gonna wanna put 1 1032 screw through. Now, before you finish completely screwing it in, insert your second bar. Things are just easier doing it that way. Just gonna wanna make sure everything's lined up. Line up that screw. You don't need to go super tight with it until you feel it stop. You're gonna take your hex knot, put it through the front here, and take your second long screw and screw it in. You just want to make sure you're doing this facing upward so that the nut actually goes through. See it on the other side, pop through there. It's gonna be a tight squeeze, but you're gonna take one of your hex nuts, finick it in here. It should slip into that hole in the grip. You should see that. And now you're gonna take your, I don't remember what this piece is called, but basically it's the guide for your plunger tube. And you're gonna wanna make sure the ring is on the back. And you're going to just slide that forward and make sure that nut doesn't fall out like it just did with me. It needs to stay in there, obviously. You're just gonna lock off that nut, take another 1032 screw, long screw, push it into the hole here, thread it through the back. You may need a long screwdriver for this or a thin one, just something to get in between the bars. You can also technically do this before putting the bars in. Just put these two together. Up to you, however you want to do it. Now you're gonna slide on your spacer. Before actually putting your magwell base on, we're going to set this aside for a moment and we're going to do our sling elastics. You're gonna take the longest elastic in your inventory, your turnaround, your magwell base. You're going to put the elastic through the hole in the turnaround, thread it all the way through, comes out the other side. Make sure things are somewhat even. It's okay if they're not completely even, you can iron things out later. Then you're going to put it through the outside holes in the magwell base, and you're going to bring them up through the middle. That should look like this. Then you're gonna push them up through the bottom of the turnaround hole. It should look like that. You're gonna just push this through. Now, if it doesn't go completely through on its own, you can use the 1032 long screw that goes in here to just coax things through. You're gonna put that screw through, and you're gonna make sure that your elastics are on the top side of this. Pull things taut, play around with how your slack works. So I just like things relatively tight. You're gonna take one of your hex nuts, thread it on a decent amount so that you don't have to go too far. Now you're going to flip your turnaround up and you're going to push that screw back, and all the while providing tension on the elastics so that you don't lose slack. Now, once you get that piece caught in, these pieces shouldn't feel any slack. Now you're gonna wanna just thread this through. You just thread through the back of the turnaround till it bottoms out. You may need to use a screwdriver just to get it the last bit of the way. You don't have to tighten super much, just enough so that it doesn't pop out when it's not supposed to. Now, we're not done with the turnaround quite yet. You're gonna take your 2 barrel O-rings. You're gonna put those inside the turnaround. This is to hold your barrel. You may need a screwdriver to do this. I find just pushing them in with a flathead screwdriver helps a lot. By the way, if you want another nice Caramel Designs blaster, always check out the skewer. It's a lot of fun. That should be your barrel O-rings in. Now you take your -123, that's your largest XR O-ring, and you're gonna put that around the turnaround. Now, we're gonna take our magwell, we're gonna put it on the back of the turnaround. We're gonna take 2 440 screws, and there's 2 little holes in the top here. We're just gonna drop the screws in, thread them in. And I find that angling towards whichever corner you're doing helps a little bit with lining things up. Not super tight, just keep things normal. Now, you're gonna wanna take your stock pad, put that on the back, along with 4 more 440 screws, tighten things up here. Remember, you don't want to strip these out. Again, you want your stock to follow the curve, so if you want, you can take your breech block, just make sure things look nice and symmetrical. And that is your rear assembly complete. You're going to add this to the assembly you just made. You're just gonna want those elastics in their proper place. You don't want them stuck in the middle there, so you're just gonna pull the spacer towards it just so things line up properly. Before you push the whole assembly together, you're just gonna want to take your plunger tube. Before you put your plunger tube in, just gonna add a little bit of lubricant to the inside, seat your plunger tube. And it helps just twist things around a little until that O-ring seats. Push the whole assembly together. You're gonna take your plunger, lubricate that. Remember, never too much lube. You're just gonna put that inside the plunger, run it back and forth a few times. You may want to readjust your tension on your plunger. So this is final fit. Now before you put your spring in, you're gonna wanna take 4 small 1032 screws and screw them into the back here. I'm just gonna put this over to the other side. Take 2 more of your 1032 screws, screw those in. Now your whole blaster should be very rigid. Just make sure everything feels nice and tight. Check your mag release. Now take your spring, put it in, grab your spring cup, guide that on. You want to be careful because there's 2 little teeth on the inside of the spring cup. Those have to match onto the guide rod. So if your spring cup is misaligned, wiggle it around a bit. Just make sure everything fits. Now you're going to take your other 2 bars, take your breech, slide those in. You're going to take 2 small 1032 screws and you're just going to thread those on. And the holes should only line up one way, so you should be fine. You won't misalign anything. That's your breech block made. You're just going to put this through the back. You just run it back and forth a few times just so it loosens up a bit. You're going to take your breech terminator. I have a shorter one here. Push that onto the end. Holes should line up. It only goes on one way. Put your screws in. 2 short 1032s. Or 4 in the case if you have the long terminator or the slide variant. Be careful when tightening this. It's not going to get super tight because these holes are not threaded. Now don't test fire your blaster yet because the spring cup will explode out the front. You don't want that. I'm going to set this aside for now and we're going to create our barrel clamp. Now this is one of the most finicky parts of the blaster, so just settle in for the long haul, I suppose. Now you're going to need your muzzle pieces, your clamp, your latch, and that should be all. You're gonna need 7 440 screws, a short 1032, or it should be a special screw labeled barrel clamp. You're gonna wanna use that one because it has a little bit of extra length. 1 dowel pin, 1 hex knot. Now the first thing to do, put your dowel pin through your latch. I want that about halfway through. The sequencing is kind of important, so just bear with me here. You're going to want to tie a knot on one side of the elastic, put that through the muzzle. Then you're going to want to put that free end through the hole in the clamp. Just going to want to push it through until it peeks out the bottom here. If you want, you can remove the latch to make it easier. Pull your elastic through and then go across to the hole here. And this is where a bit of test fitting comes in. Just going to pull it through the front of the barrel clamp here. You're going to take one of your 440 screws, start putting it through the back. You're not going to put it in all the way though. And this is basically going to lock in your elastic so you can test fit things. I'd pull off the spring cup for this so things are a little easier. I'd move things back. Now what you're going to want to do is take your elastic, hold it firm at a tension you think you'd like. You're going to want to pull it pretty tight because you're basically going to slide it into the groove and see how it feels. This feels a little too tight, so I'm going to pull it a little bit tighter. And, just wiggle it back and forth a bit. You don't want too much wiggle. If you're getting more wiggle, let out a little bit of slack. Try it again. Okay, I think that's good. I'm just gonna take this 440 screw in the back, screw it in. Screw it in all the way, it's not gonna bottom out. Elastic should be fine to let go. You're just gonna take your barrel clamp back out. Just, I guess, make sure your slack is all where it's supposed to be. You're gonna want to trim the elastic in the front as close as possible. Just makes things a little easier. Replace your latch, hook facing upward. Take your muzzle, flip it upward in the position that it's meant to be, and just slide it over the divot. Things should all just click into place. Now take 4 440 screws and just put everything together. So once your muzzle is put together, you're gonna want to take your barrel. You're gonna want to slide your clamp on. Make sure it clicks into place. You're gonna want to start sliding your barrel through until it bottoms out. And you're gonna want to take one hex screw, put it through the barrel clamp. You're gonna want to usually hold it facing right, just helps with things. And you're gonna take the one labeled barrel clamp. You're gonna want to put that in, screw it in until you feel it start to grab. You may need something on the other side to grab the hex nut or push the hex nut towards the screw, but should fit in place. You just slide this forward. You just pull your barrel back out, put your spring in, put your spring cup in, slide everything into place. Remember what I said about the grooves. You need to make sure that your spring, everything's just aligned properly, so it should match up. You're gonna take your barrel clamp, you're gonna put that through everything, and you're gonna just click that into place. And then as your last piece, you're going to want to put on your muzzle, because orange tips are always nice. Take two 440 screws. Again, you can typically do this in any order of steps. I just decided to do it this way because I color match a lot. So, I'll do the orange last. All right, and your red herring should be done. So pull it all the way back, then push your breech forward. I'm just gonna dry fire it. Should get a decent seal. And there we go. Test fit your mags. Make sure everything's in order. And you have a finished red herring. This has been Nathan with NS Arms. Thank you for watching.